The hands that gripped my arms weren't gentle. They weren't meant to be. Two Ironclaw enforcers dragged me down the Caldwell's front porch steps like I was a sack of grain, my bare feet scraping against the splintered wood. I stumbled on the last step and my knee cracked against the concrete walkway, pain shooting up my thigh like liquid fire. Neither of them paused. Neither of them cared. Fight them, Nick snarled inside my skull, my wolf packing furiously behind my ribs. Shift. Bite. Run. I couldn't. These men were warriors, tall, thick-necked, radiating the kind of dominant energy that made my Omega instincts scream at me to submit. Fighting them would be like throwing myself into a wood chipper and expecting to come out whole. So I did what I'd always done. I endured. Behind me, I heard the screen door creak open. I didn't need to turn around to know Margaret Caldwell was standing on the porch, arms crossed, watching her investment walk away. 18 years she'd housed me, if you could call it housing. 18 years of scrubbing her floors until my knuckles bled, of eating whatever scraps Clarissa left on her plate, of being reminded with every breath that I was a charity case, a burden, a mouth they never wanted to feed. You're worthless, Sierra. Your own mother didn't even want you, Margaret's favorite lullaby. She'd sung it so many times I'd almost started to believe it. Almost. I caught movement in the upstairs window. Clarissa. My foster sister stood behind the glass with her phone in one hand and a smirk on her painted lips. She was recording. Of course she was recording. This was entertainment to her, the unwanted Omega finally being carted off like yesterday's trash. I looked away. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing anything on my face. Victor Caldwell was nowhere to be seen. He'd done his part already, signed whatever paper, shaken whatever hand, pocketed whatever blood money Alpha Kale Voss had offered for me. Victor was probably already at the card tables, gambling away my price tag before the ink had dried. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. The enforcers shoved me into the back seat of a black SUV with tinted windows. The leather was cold against my bare legs. One of them, the taller one with a jagged scar across his jaw, slammed the door and climbed into the passenger seat. The other took the wheel. "Here's how this works," Scarjaw said without turning around. His voice was flat, bored, like he'd given this speech a dozen times. "You belong to Alpha Voss now. You give him an heir, you behave. In 2 years, you're released. Simple, simple." Like I was a rental agreement, like there was a return policy on my body. I'm not a person to them. I'm livestock. The SUV pulled away from the curb. I watched the Caldwell house shrink in the rearview mirror, that peeling yellow-sided prison I'd called home for nearly 2 decades. I waited for sadness, for nostalgia, for some small, sentimental ache at leaving the only life I'd known. Nothing came. Just a cold, hollow dread settling in my stomach like a stone dropped into deep water. Because I'd heard the stories about Alpha Kale Voss. Everyone had. The youngest Alpha King in Ironclaw's history. The man who challenged his own father for the title and won, though "won" was a polite word for what the rumors described. Ruthless, merciless. A wolf who ruled through fear and made examples of anyone who defied him, and I was being delivered to him like a package. The SUV turned off the main road and plunged into a corridor of towering black pines. Darkness swallowed us whole. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the shadows, and at the end of it iron gates. Massive, ancient, wrought into the shape of a snarling wolf skull wreathed in thorns, the Ironclaw crest. The gates groaned open like the jaws of something hungry. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Deep inside me, beneath the terror, beneath the dread, Nyx pressed her nose against my consciousness. Warm, steady, fierce in a way I couldn't yet afford to be. "We will survive this," she whispered. I clenched my fists in my lap and prayed she was right. The Ironclaw compound rose out of the forest like something born from the earth itself, a fortress of gray stone and black steel that sprawled across the mountainside, brutal and imposing and ancient. Torches lined the perimeter walls despite the modern floodlights mounted above them, as though the pack couldn't quite let go of the old ways. Or didn't want to. The SUV stopped in a cobblestone courtyard. Scarjaw opened my door and jerked his chin. Out. I stepped onto the cold stone barefoot. The mountain air hit my skin like a slap, pine and wood smoke and something else beneath it, something wild and electric that made Nyx lift her head inside me. "What is that?" I asked her. She didn't answer, just paced. Restless, I wasn't given time to wonder. A side door opened and two female servants emerged, faces blank, eyes averted. They took me by the elbows, not roughly but not gently either, and led me inside. What followed was the most dehumanizing hour of my life. A physician with steel-rimmed glasses and cold, clinical hands examined me in a white-tiled room that smelled like antiseptic. He checked my teeth like I was a horse at auction, pressed a stethoscope to my chest, drew blood, made notes on a clipboard without once looking me in the eye or asking my name. "Healthy," he announced to no one in particular. "Fertile, she'll do, she'll do." Like I was a cut of meat that passed inspection. Then the servant stripped me, scrubbed me raw in a stone-walled washroom with water so hot it turned my skin pink, and dressed me in a simple white gown that felt more like a surrender flag than clothing. My auburn hair hung damp and heavy down my back. I caught my reflection in a fogged mirror and barely recognized the wide-eyed, hollow-cheeked girl staring back at me. I was led down a long corridor and deposited in front of a woman who looked like she'd been carved from the same stone as the fortress. "I'm Marin, head of household." Iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, sharp dark eyes that catalogued everything and revealed nothing, a face etched with decades of pack politics and hard decisions. She looked me over the way a general surveys a battlefield, assessing damage, calculating odds. But when she took my arm to guide me forward, her grip was careful, almost gentle. Her thumb brushed against a bruise the enforcers had left, and something flickered across her expression, there and gone so fast I might have imagined it. "These two will attend to you," she said, nodding toward two young Omega girls hovering behind her. "Tessa, Lena." Tessa was a whirlwind of copper curls and nervous energy. She immediately started talking, words tumbling out like she couldn't contain them. "The kitchens are down that hall. Don't go near the east wing after dark, and if anyone asks, you didn't hear anything from the third floor last Tuesday." "Tessa," Marin said flatly. "Right, shutting up." Lena was Tessa's opposite, small, dark-haired, silent. She watched me with enormous brown eyes and said nothing. But when Tessa turned away, Lena pressed something warm into my hand, a bread roll tucked inside a cloth napkin. Our eyes met. She gave the tiniest nod. My throat tightened. I hadn't expected kindness here. I didn't trust it, but I took the bread. Tessa walked beside me as we moved through the corridors, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Listen, Alpha Kale is," she searched for the word, "terrifying. Don't make eye contact unless he tells you to. Don't speak unless spoken to. And whatever you do, stay away from Vivienne." "Who's Vivienne?" Tessa's face tightened. "His consort, unofficial, but she acts like she owns the title. Beautiful, cruel. She's made 3 Omegas disappear from this compound in the last year. Disappeared. As in nobody talks about them anymore." A chill crawled up my spine that had nothing to do with the cold stone beneath my feet. My room was in the servants' wing. Small. Sparse. A narrow bed with a thin blanket, a wooden chair, stone walls that wept condensation in the cold. It made my room at the Caldwells look luxurious, and that room had been a converted closet. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. The bread roll sat untouched in my lap. Bear him an heir, 2 years, freedom. What kind of man buys a woman like a horse? Nick stirred again. That strange electric hum was stronger now, a pull I couldn't name, tugging somewhere behind my sternum. I pressed my hand against my chest. Anxiety, that's all it was. Fear manifests as something physical. "That's not what this is," Nix whispered, but she wouldn't say more. The door opened. Marin stood in the frame, her expression carved from granite. "On your feet," she said. "The Alpha will see you now." Every drop of blood in my body turned to ice. Marin walked 2 steps ahead, her heels clicking a steady rhythm against the stone floor. Sierra focused on that sound because focusing on anything else, the trembling in her hands, the hammering of her heart, the electric hum that grew louder with every step, would have undone her. They passed through a set of double doors reinforced with iron bands and entered the great hall. The room was cavernous. Vaulted stone ceilings soared overhead, supported by massive timber beams blackened with age. Torchlight danced across the walls, casting long, flickering shadows that twisted like living things. Warriors lined both sides of the hall, dozens of them, arms crossed, eyes sharp, radiating so much dominant energy that Sierra's Omega instinct screamed at her to drop to her knees and bare her throat. She locked her legs and kept walking. At the far end of the hall, elevated on a stone platform, sat a chair that was less furniture and more throne, carved from dark wood, ancient and imposing. But Sierra's eyes didn't linger on the chair. They found him. Alpha Kale Voss stood at the base of the platform, arms folded across his broad chest, watching her approach the way a predator watches something small moving through tall grass. Dark brown hair pushed back from a face that could have been sculpted from granite, all hard angles, sharp jaw, brutal symmetry. Pale silver eyes that caught the torchlight and threw it back. Like mirrors, he was tall, enormous really. The black shirt stretched across his shoulders couldn't hide the battle scars that marked his forearms, his neck, his knuckles. He was the most terrifying thing she had ever seen, and then their eyes locked. The world detonated. It hit her like a bolt of lightning driven straight through her sternum, white-hot, electric, a current of pure energy that exploded outward from her chest and raced down every nerve in her body. Her vision blurred. Her knees buckled. Inside her, Nyx threw her head back and howled with a ferocity Sierra had never felt from her before. Mate, mate, he is ours. The word ricocheted through her skull like a gunshot. Mate. This man, this terrifying, brutal, beautiful man, was her fated mate. The moon goddess had looked at this monster and decided he belonged to her. The hall had gone deathly silent. Every warrior stood frozen. They could feel it, the bond igniting like a wildfire, the energy crackling between the two of them like a live wire splitting the air. Sierra's lips moved before her brain could stop them. You're my mate. The words fell into the silence like stones dropped into a frozen lake. Kale felt the bond hit him like a wrecking ball to the chest. One moment he was standing in his hall, watching the trembling Omega girl approach with the detached interest of a man inspecting a purchase. The next moment the world cracked open and Fenris erupted inside him, roaring, clawing, slamming against his ribs with a force that nearly drove him to his knees. Mate, ours. Claim her now. Her scent flooded his senses, wildflowers and rain and something underneath, something warm and golden that wrapped around his lungs and squeezed until he couldn't breathe. The bond blazed through him like molten iron poured directly into his veins. And then his mind caught up. This trembling, wide-eyed Omega girl in a white gown. This was the woman he had purchased a debt payment. A nobody from a disgraced foster family with no pack, no rank, no name. The moon goddess had chained him, Alpha King of Ironclaw, the most feared wolf in Thornhaven, to a girl he had bought like cattle. Rage swallowed everything else whole. Hot, blinding, absolute. This is a mockery. This is a curse. He would not accept it. He would burn this bond to ash before he let fate make a fool of him in front of his own warriors. Sierra watched it happen in real time. She saw the moment recognition flooded his silver eyes. She saw what came after, something raw and staggering and almost vulnerable, lasting barely a heartbeat before it was consumed by fury, so cold it seemed to freeze the air between them. His jaw clenched. A muscle jumped beneath the scar on his neck. His hands dropped to his sides, fingers curling into fists so tight the knuckles went white. When he spoke, his voice was a blade wrapped in frost, each word precise, deliberate, designed to destroy. I, Kale Voss, Alpha of Ironclaw, reject you as my mate. The words tore through Sierra like a serrated knife dragged slowly between her ribs. Physical agony. There was no other way to describe it. The bond, newly formed, still blazing, still reaching desperately for him, was ripped in half. Pain exploded through her chest like a grenade detonating behind her sternum. Her knees hit the stone floor. She gasped, both hands clutching at her chest as if she could hold herself together through sheer force of will. Inside her, Nyx wailed, a broken, anguished, guttural sound that echoed through every corner of Sierra's soul and left nothing untouched. The warriors shifted uncomfortably along the walls. Someone murmured. The great hall seemed to tilt on its axis, torchlight blurring and swimming. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. Not here, not in front of him, not in front of any of them. Sierra ground her teeth together so hard she tasted copper. She forced her spine straight, vertebra by vertebra, through agony, through humiliation, through the screaming protest of every shattered nerve. She dragged her chin up and looked directly into those cold silver eyes. He flinched. It was microscopic, a fraction of a second. A crack in the mask so small that no one else in the hall could have caught it. But Sierra was looking right at him. She saw it. And she filed it away in the place where she kept every wound, every lesson, every debt that would one day be repaid. "Take her to the dungeons," Cale said. His voice was flat, final. The voice of a man slamming a door shut on something he couldn't afford to feel. Guards seized Sierra's arms and hauled her upright. Her legs barely held. The pain in her chest was a living thing, thrashing, burning, screaming against its cage. But as they dragged her backward toward the iron doors, Sierra did not drop her gaze. She held his eyes, those frozen, furious, beautiful silver eyes, and she let him see exactly what lived behind hers. Not sadness, not pleading, not the submission he expected. Defiance, pure, unbroken, incandescent defiance. "You will regret this," Nyx growled through their shared consciousness, and the words were meant for him, for fate, for every soul who had ever looked at Sierra Thornwood and seen something disposable. The iron doors groaned shut between them. Darkness swallowed her whole. But in that darkness, burning low and steady like the candle flame she didn't yet know was coming, something new had taken root. Not hope, not yet, something fiercer. Sierra, 5 days in the dark. Time didn't exist in the dungeons. No windows, no clocks, just dripping water, scurrying rats, and cold that burrowed into bone like something alive and hungry. The rejection wound was worse. It throbbed constantly in her chest, raw, pulsing, as if something essential had been torn loose but left dangling by a single nerve. Some moments it flared so sharply that Sierra curled on the damp stone floor and pressed her forehead to her knees until the wave passed. She didn't cry, not once. Tessa came on the third night, shoving bread and a wool blanket through the cell bars. "If Marin catches me, I'm dead," she whispered, "but I couldn't leave you with nothing." Lena came the following night. Silent as always, she pressed a small candle and matched through the bars. Their eyes met. Lena nodded once and vanished. The flame was tiny, barely enough to push back the shadows. It was the most beautiful thing Sierra had ever seen. She sat in that weak circle of light and talked to Nyx. "Is the bond gone?" "No," Nyx's voice was weary but certain. "You never accepted his rejection. There's still a thread, thin, fragile, but there. Is that a comfort or a curse?" Nyx didn't answer. Sierra stared into the flame and let her mind wander backward, her mother a faceless ghost. The Caldwells, 18 years of being reminded she was worthless. And now this, bought, rejected, caged, always unwanted, always disposable. She let the thought come. Then she let it pass. Because she'd heard it so many times the words had lost their teeth. She made a quiet vow spoken to no one but Nyx and the guttering flame. "When I survive this, no one will ever own me again." Or as Nyx agreed, Cale, he couldn't sleep. 5 nights since he'd thrown her in that cell, and he hadn't managed more than an hour at a stretch. Every time he closed his eyes, he smelled her, wildflowers and rain, even through 70 feet of stone. Fenris was punishing him. His wolf refused commands during training, flooding him with her emotions at the worst moments. Cale would be sitting in a strategy meeting and suddenly feel her shivering. His claws would pierce his palms under the table while he kept his face perfectly blank. "You look like hell," Jack said on the 4th morning, leaning against the doorframe with that carefully neutral expression he wore when delivering dangerous observations. "Fighting a mate bond is like fighting the moon, Cale. It will outlast you." "Get out." Jax left. He was right. That made it worse. Vivienne came that night. Black silk, calculated smile, practiced confidence. She'd warmed his bed for 2 years. She knew every move, every trick. She reached for his jaw. Revulsion shot through him like acid. He jerked away before he could stop himself. Her eyes widened. Shock became suspicion, became something dangerous. "I'm tired," he said. She smiled, sharp, cold, nothing like warmth. "Of course, my alpha." She left. Cale knew he'd made an enemy. He didn't care. At 3 in the morning, he stood outside the dungeon door. He didn't remember deciding to come. But here he was, palm pressed flat against iron, listening to her heartbeat through the stone. Steady, slow, she was finally asleep. That fragile thread hummed between them. His forehead dropped against the cold metal. He stood there for a long time, breathing, listening, saying nothing. Then he walked away and found Marin waiting in the corridor, dark eyes knowing. "Bring her upstairs," he said, each word dragged out of him like a hook through flesh. "She's no use to me dead." Marin studied him for one measured moment. "Yes, Alpha." He walked back to his chambers. Fenris fell quiet for the first time in 5 days. The silence felt like surrender. The room was a cage dressed in silk. Adjacent to Kale's quarters, it had everything the dungeon lacked: a proper bed with clean sheets, a wardrobe of simple clothes, a tray of warm food, and a window. Moonlight poured through the glass like liquid silver, painting the stone floor in pale light. Sierra didn't trust any of it. Marin lingered in the doorway while Sierra stood motionless, staring at the window like it might vanish. "He couldn't stay away," Marin said quietly. "The bond is torturing him. Use that knowledge wisely." Then she was gone, and Sierra was alone with Moonlight and the steady throb of the rejection wound beneath her ribs. Over the following days, Kale summoned her for dinner. They sat at opposite ends of a long oak table in his private dining room. Candlelight. Silence so heavy it pressed against Sierra's eardrums. He watched her constantly, silver eyes tracking every movement of her hands, her mouth, the way she tucked her auburn hair behind her ear, but spoke only in clipped, cold sentences. "Pass the salt. Eat more. You're too thin." Commands, not conversation. On the third night, something shifted. He set down his glass and asked, without looking at her, "What was your life like before?" Sierra considered lying, considered silence. Instead, she gave him the truth, flat, factual, stripped of self-pity. The Caldwells, the labor, the starvation of affection, being sold like furniture to settle a debt. Kale's jaw tightened with every sentence. Something flickered behind those silver eyes, recognition maybe. Pain he couldn't quite hide. "No one should be treated like property," he said quietly. The irony detonated between them like a grenade. His eyes met hers and she watched him realize exactly what he'd said, exactly what he'd done. His walls slammed shut. He stood abruptly. "We're done tonight." Vivienne found her the next morning. Sierra was walking the corridor outside her room when a hand seized her arm and spun her around. Ice blue eyes blazed inches from her face, stunning, furious, lethal. "Let me be perfectly clear," Vivienne said, her voice silk over razor wire. "You're a broodmare, nothing more. Don't confuse his curiosity with caring." Her nails dug into Sierra's arm. "I've been warming his bed for years, little Omega. When you've served your purpose, you'll be discarded like every other temporary thing." Sierra held her gaze, didn't flinch, didn't blink. But when Vivienne released her and walked away, Sierra's hands were shaking. The thunderstorm hit that night. Rain hammered the fortress like fists. Lightning split the sky. Sierra was standing at her window watching the world fracture when her door burst open. Kale stood in the doorway, soaking wet, chest heaving, eyes wild. He'd been running in wolf form. Water streamed from his dark hair down the hard planes of his face. The bond between them roared to life, pulling like gravity, like tide, like something that would kill them both if they kept fighting it. "Why are you here?" Sierra demanded. "I don't know." His voice was raw, broken. "Yes, you do," they argued, about the rejection, about power, about the fact that he'd thrown her in a dungeon and now stood at her door looking at her like she was the only real thing in his world. Then the argument became something else entirely. His mouth found hers, desperate, fierce, tasting of rain. She should have pushed him away. Every rational thought screamed at her to stop. But the bond was a wildfire and she was so tired of being cold. One night, raw, desperate, devastating. Afterward, Kale lay still for exactly 3 breaths. Then his walls rebuilt themselves. She could almost hear the stones clicking into place. He rose, dressed, and left without a single word. The door clicked shut. Sierra lay in the dark, hand pressed flat against her stomach, listening to the storm fade and feeling something she couldn't yet name settling deep inside her. She stared at the ceiling and thought of Marin's words. The moonlit window, the iron gates, Vivienne's razor smile. She had to escape before whatever was growing between them and possibly inside her made it impossible. 3 weeks later, Sierra knew. The morning sickness came first, violent waves of nausea that hit without warning and left her trembling over a basin. Then the heightened senses. She could smell the kitchen fires from 3 corridors away, could hear Tessa's heartbeat from across the room. "Nix," she whispered to her wolf. "Am I?" "Yes." Nix's voice was fierce and tender simultaneously. "A new life. Ours to protect." Sierra pressed both hands flat against her stomach and felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Pregnant, with the child of the man who had rejected her, the heir Alpha Kale Voss had purchased her to produce. If he found out, she would never leave this fortress. She would become exactly what Vivienne had promised, a brood mare, permanent property, a body that had served its purpose. She went to Marin that night. The older woman listened in silence, her dark eyes unreadable. When Sierra finished, Marin reached across the table and gripped her hand with surprising strength. "I knew your mother," she said quietly. "Leora, she was special, different from other wolves, hunted for it." Her jaw tightened. "She left you with the Caldwells to protect you. Now you must protect your child." Marin gave her a root, a gap in the patrol rotation that opened during the new moon when the warrior's senses dulled and the forest swallowed everything in darkness. 3 nights from now. Tessa cried when Sierra told her, quiet, hiccuping sobs she tried to muffle with her sleeve. "You'll die out there alone." "I'll die here for certain," Sierra replied. Lena didn't cry. She pressed a small moonstone pendant into Sierra's palm, smooth, cool, faintly luminous. "For luck," she whispered, her first words in Sierra's presence. New moon night. No light, no stars. Kale was 40 miles east, handling a rogue incursion on the border. Sierra had waited 3 agonizing days for this window. She slipped through the servants' entrance at midnight, bare feet on cold stone. The training ground stretched ahead, open, exposed, terrifying. She crossed them in shadow, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain every guard in the compound could hear it. The tree line swallowed her whole. She ran, 3 days through unclaimed wilderness. No path. No shelter. She ate berries and drank from streams and kept moving because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant fear and fear meant paralysis. Nyx navigated when Sierra's exhausted mind couldn't, guiding her around ravines, steering her away from territorial markers, but the Nyx was weakening. The pregnancy drained energy from them both. By the 3rd day, Sierra was stumbling more than running, her vision blurring, her legs shaking with every step. Then she heard it, howling, behind her, close. Not Ironclaw. These howls were ragged, feral, wrong, rogues. She ran harder. Branches whipped her face. Thorns tore her arms. The howling grew louder, 5 distinct voices, hungry and closing fast. A ravine split the earth ahead. Dead end. Sierra turned. 5 wolves emerged from the darkness, yellow-eyed, scarred, snarling with the mindless aggression of wolves who'd abandoned pack law. They fanned out, circling her. She shifted. For the first time in months, Nyx burst forward, silver-white fur, smaller than every wolf facing them, weakened but snarling. They took down the first rogue together, Nyx's jaws finding its throat. But the others closed in. The largest rogue lunged. Sierra saw teeth, saw death. Then a massive tawny wolf exploded from the tree line like a missile and tore the rogue apart midair. More wolves followed, 6, 8, 10, crashing into the rogues with devastating precision. The feral pack scattered, yelping, broken. Sierra collapsed, shifted back to human form involuntarily, her body simply giving out. The forest floor was cold against her bare skin. Darkness crept inward from the edges of her vision. A shape moved above her. A man shifting from wolf form, sandy brown hair, warm green eyes, a long scar running from temple to jaw. He caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and startlingly gentle. "Please," she whispered, her hand finding her stomach. "My baby." His green eyes widened, then nothing. Sunlight, warm, golden, real sunlight pressing against Sierra's closed eyelids. She lay still for a long moment, convinced she was dreaming. Clean sheets, soft pillow. Scent of wildflowers, actual wildflowers, not a phantom memory, drifting from somewhere nearby. Birdsong outside the window, not ravens, songbirds. Then the memory crashed back, rogues, teeth, a tawny wolf, green eyes. Her hand flew to her stomach. "Easy," a woman's voice, calm and professional. "You and the baby are both fine." Sierra's eyes snapped open. A healer sat beside the bed, middle-aged, kind-faced, pressing a warm compress to Sierra's forehead. "You were severely dehydrated and exhausted. But no lasting damage. The little one is strong." Sierra's throat closed. She pressed her palm harder against her stomach and felt something crack inside her chest, not the rejection wound, but something older. The brittle shell she'd built around the part of herself that still hoped for good things. "Fine." The baby is fine. She blinked hard, didn't cry, close though, dangerously close. A knock at the door, gentle, patient, not a demand. May I come in? Sierra stiffened. The healer nodded encouragingly and stepped out. Alpha Ronan Hale entered the room the way sunlight enters without force. Sandy brown hair, warm green eyes, that long scar from temple to jaw that should have made him frightening but somehow didn't. He was tall, lean, dressed simply in a gray Henley and dark jeans. He smiled and it reached his eyes. I'm Ronan, he said. You're at the Silver Pine compound. My patrol found you 3 nights ago. He pulled a chair beside the bed and sat below her eye level, she noticed, deliberately non-threatening. You're safe here. 2 words, you're safe. Sierra had never heard them before and meant it. She didn't trust them now, but something in his green eyes made her want to. Ronan. He hadn't told her yet. The second chance bond had hit him the moment he'd caught her falling body in the forest. Warm golden light flooding his chest like a sunrise after years of darkness. His wolf alder had surged forward with a recognition, so fierce it nearly knocked Ronan off his feet. Mate. Second chance. Hours. 2 years after Alara died during one of Kale's border raids. 2 years of hollow grief, of Alder retreating into silence, of Ronan convincing himself the moon goddess was done with him. Now here was this bruised, starving, extraordinary woman, carrying another wolf's scent, covered in battle wounds, whispering please my baby with her last conscious breath, and the bond had chosen her. He wouldn't tell her. Not yet. She was too fragile, too hunted, too accustomed to men who took without asking. He would not be another hand that grabbed. He would be the open door she chose to walk through. Sierra, Kale Voss, Sierra said carefully. You know him. Ronan's smile dimmed. Half-brother, same father, different mothers. We've been rivals since before we could shift. He said it simply, without bitterness, though Sierra caught the shadow that passed behind his eyes. She processed this. The man who'd saved her life was blood-related to the man who'd tried to destroy it. And there was something else, a warmth humming quietly in her chest whenever Ronan was near, not the violent lightning of Kale's bond. Something gentler, sunlight instead of electricity. It confused her deeply. You can stay as long as you want, Ronan said. No conditions, no price. Cole, his beta, a broad-shouldered man with suspicious eyes, watched from the doorway. He said nothing, but his doubt was loud. Days passed. Sierra healed. She ate 3 meals daily and stopped flinching when people entered rooms. She slept through entire nights without dreaming of dungeons. One evening, Ronan told her the worst joke she'd ever heard, something about a wolf walking into a tavern. It was objectively terrible. She laughed anyway, the sound bursting out of her like something escaping a cage. Ronan stared at her with an expression she couldn't name, like she was the sunrise, but the pregnancy was progressing. Her belly was rounding beneath her borrowed clothes. She caught Ronan's eyes dropping to her midsection one morning over breakfast. A quick glance, immediately corrected but unmistakable. The question was forming on his lips. She could see it building. Cold dread pooled in Sierra's stomach like ice water, because she knew what came next, and she knew what she would have to do. Ronan asked on a Tuesday morning. They were sitting on the back porch of the pack house, sunlight warm on their shoulders, mugs of tea growing cold between them. He'd been quieter than usual all morning, stealing glances at her midsection, opening his mouth, closing it again. Finally, gently, carefully, Sierra, the baby. Not a question, not yet. Just 2 words laid on the table like a hand extended in the dark. Sierra set down her mug. Her fingers were steady. Her heart was not. How far along? He asked. His voice was soft. No accusation, no demand, just Ronan, patient, kind, giving her every possible chance to answer on her own terms. She saw it in his green eyes, the flicker. Barely there, quickly controlled but unmistakable. Hope. He wanted this. A mate. A family. A second chance at everything Kale's border raid had stolen when Alara died. Ronan Hale, who had been nothing but gentle with her, who had asked permission before entering her room, who had told terrible jokes just to hear her laugh. He wanted this with a desperation he was trying very hard to hide. And Sierra had to decide in the space of a single heartbeat what kind of person she was going to be. Tell him the truth, Nix urged. The baby is Kale's. He deserves honesty. The truth. The baby is Kale's, and then what? Sierra's mind raced through the possibilities like a wolf sprinting through a burning forest. If Ronan knew the child belonged to his half-brother, the man he'd been at war with for years, what would he do? Send her back to Ironclaw, use her as a political weapon, reject her the way Cale had, and send her stumbling back into the wilderness with nothing? She couldn't survive another rejection. The first one had nearly killed her. The wound still throbbed beneath her ribs, a constant, aching reminder that the moon goddess's gifts came with teeth. And the baby, her baby, growing inside her, tiny and vulnerable and entirely dependent on the choices Sierra made right now in this moment on this sunlit porch. Your mother left you to protect you. Now you must protect your child. Marin's words, Leora's legacy. A mother who had lied, who had hidden her daughter, abandoned her to strangers, let the world believe she was nobody, all to keep her safe. Sierra looked into Ronan's kind green eyes, and she lied. The baby is yours. Her voice didn't waver. That night you found me. When you carried me back, I was barely conscious, but she let the implication hang in the warm morning air like smoke. Ronan went still, completely, absolutely still. Then joy broke across his face like dawn splitting a dark horizon. His eyes filled, not quite tears, but the bright, liquid shine of a man who had spent 2 years in grief and suddenly found himself holding hope again. He reached for her, carefully, gently. His hands cupped her face and he pressed his forehead against hers. His breath was warm, his voice cracked on 2 words. We're going to be a family. Sierra closed her eyes. Inside her chest, something that felt like poison spread slowly through her bloodstream. Nyx howled, low, mournful, anguished, and retreated into silence. The guilt was already there, seeping through every crack in her resolve like ink dropped into clear water. It's for the baby. It's for survival. It's what mothers do. She repeated it like a prayer. It didn't help. Cale. Jax delivered the report in the clipped, careful tone he reserved for news that might get furniture destroyed. She's in Silverpine, confirmed. Ronan's pack took her in after a rogue attack near the eastern ravine. Cale stood at his study window, staring at the tree line. He hadn't moved in several minutes, hadn't blinked. Silverpine, his half-brother's territory. The woman fate had chosen for him, the woman he had rejected, caged, and driven away, was now living under the protection of the man he hated most in the world. Fenris howled inside him, not with rage, with something worse. Cale picked up a pen and wrote 5 words on formal pack stationery. Return what is mine. Ronan's reply arrived the following day. 4 words on parchment. She belongs to no one. She stays by choice. Cale read it once, read it again, then crushed the letter in his fist so tightly his claws shredded the paper. His silver eyes burned, not with anger, though anger was there, volcanic and familiar. Beneath it was something he had no name for, something that felt like drowning. He turned to Jax. Prepare a convoy. I'm going to Silverpine myself. Cale's convoy arrived at Silverpine's border at dawn. 12 Ironclaw warriors in black vehicles, flanking the Alpha King like a fist wrapped in iron. Ronan was already waiting. He stood at the border marker with Cole at his right shoulder, arms crossed, green eyes hard. Behind him, Silverpine wolves lined the tree line in human form, tense and ready. The half-brothers faced each other for the first time in 2 years. The air between them crackled with old hatred, deep, familial, carved into bone by a father who had pitted them against each other since birth. You have something that belongs to me, Cale said. His voice carried the cold authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Ronan didn't flinch. People don't belong to people, Cale. You never understood that. Then Sierra stepped out from behind Ronan. Cale saw her and the world stopped. She was healthy, glowing, auburn hair catching the morning light, and visibly, unmistakably pregnant, her belly rounded beneath a borrowed sweater, her hand resting protectively over the curve. Fenris detonated inside him. Mine, the child is mine. Cale could smell it, his own blood, his own lineage growing inside her. The recognition hit him like a hammer to the chest. His composure cracked. For 3 brutal seconds, every emotion he'd spent a lifetime suppressing was written across his face. Sierra saw it. Terror flooded her eyes. Come home, Cale said, and his voice was no longer cold. It was raw. Ironclaw was never my home, Sierra replied. Her voice shook but held. Ronan stepped between them. She's my mate, "The child is mine, you have no claim here." Kale's silver eyes locked onto Ronan's. They both knew the truth, but without Sierra's admission, Kale couldn't prove it, and forcing the issue meant war. The standoff balanced on a knife's edge. Then Vivienne's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "How touching, but someone here is lying." She emerged from the tree line, ice-blue eyes blazing, dark hair whipping in the wind, beautiful and lethal. No one had seen her approach. No one had invited her. She addressed both packs, her voice ringing across the border, clearing with theatrical precision. "The child isn't Ronan's. The timeline doesn't match. Sierra was already weeks pregnant when Ronan found her." She produced a folded paper. "Testimony from Marin, head of Ironclaw household, confirming Sierra shared Alpha Kale's bed 5 weeks before her escape." Silence. Absolute devastating silence. Ronan turned to Sierra. His green eyes, those warm, trusting sunrise eyes, were fracturing. "Tell me she's lying." Sierra opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her silence was a confession louder than any words. Ronan stepped back. One step, then another. The second chance bond screamed between them. Sierra felt it tearing, felt his pain crash through the connection like a wave of broken glass. His face didn't crumble, it emptied. Every trace of warmth drained away, leaving something hollow and devastated. Kale watched it happen. He waited for triumph. It didn't come. Instead, something cracked open inside his chest, a realization, sharp and ugly. Sierra had lied because she was asterisk that terrified of him. She had chosen deception over the possibility of being returned to him. He had made her this desperate. The guilt hit harder than any blow he'd ever taken. Before anyone could speak, the tree line exploded. Shadow Fang wolves poured from the forest, dozens of them, feral, coordinated, striking both packs simultaneously with surgical precision. They knew exactly where the gaps were, exactly where to hit. Vivienne's alliance. Her true purpose. Chaos erupted. Wolves shifted mid-stride, crashing into each other in a frenzy of teeth and blood. Ironclaw and Silverpine warriors, enemies moments ago, found themselves fighting side by side against a common threat. Kale and Ronan moved in unison without thinking. Two alphas, two wolves forged by the same brutal father, fighting back-to-back for the first time in their lives. Kale's massive black wolf tore through rogues on the left. Ronan's tawny wolf held the right flank. They moved like two halves of a mechanism that had never been assembled until now. Center of the carnage, Sierra stood frozen. A rogue lunged toward a cluster of wounded wolves nearby. Something ancient and instinctive erupted inside her. Light poured from her hands. Silver-white energy, pure moonlight, blazed outward in a protective barrier around the wounded. It hummed with power that felt older than language, older than pack law, older than memory. Sierra's eyes glowed white. Her auburn hair lifted as if caught in an invisible wind. Every wolf on the battlefield stopped and stared. "Lunar wolf," Nyx whispered, and her voice was awed. Jax tackled Vivienne as she tried to flee, pinning her to the earth. The Shadow Fang wolves, seeing their insider captured, broke ranks and scattered into the forest. The battle was over in minutes. Sierra's light flickered, dimmed, her legs buckled. Both alphas saw her falling. Both lunged. Kale reached her first. He caught her as she collapsed, her body weightless in his arms, her face pale, the silver light fading from her skin. He dropped to his knees in the blood-soaked grass, holding her against his chest, and felt the mate bond surge through him with a force that obliterated every wall he had ever built. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. His voice broke on both words. "I'm so sorry." Ronan stood 3 feet away, breathing hard, covered in rogue blood. He watched Kale hold the woman they both loved. He said nothing. The silence said everything. Sierra drifted in darkness for 3 days. Not the cold darkness of the dungeon. This was warm, soft, like being cradled in deep water. Nyx curled around her consciousness, guarding her while her body healed. Fragments of the outside world filtered through. Voices murmuring, hands changing bandages, 2 distinct heartbeats keeping vigil at different hours. One steady and patient. One restless and raw. She opened her eyes on the 3rd morning to find sunlight streaming through an unfamiliar window and both alphas asleep in chairs on opposite sides of her bed. Ronan sat upright, arms crossed, chin dropped to his chest, even in sleep composed. Kale was hunched forward, elbows on his knees, dark hair falling across his face. one hand resting inches from hers on the mattress, like he'd been reaching for her and stopped himself. Sierra looked at them both and felt the weight of everything pressing down on her chest like a stone. She sent them away, not gently, not diplomatically. She looked at Cale and then at Ronan and said, "Get out, both of you. I need to think and I can't do that with either of you in this room." Ronan left quietly. Cale opened his mouth to argue, saw something in her eyes that stopped him, and left without a word. It was the first time in her life Sierra had made a demand and had it obeyed. She spent a week alone, healing, thinking, learning. Elder Thorn, a blind, ancient wolf with milky eyes and a voice like dry leaves, visited on the fourth day. He sat beside her bed and told her what Marin had only hinted at. Your mother Leora was a lunar wolf, a bloodline blessed by the moon goddess, rare, powerful, hunted. She could heal wounds with moonlight, strengthen pack bonds, commune with the goddess herself. His sightless eyes turned toward her. You carry this bloodline, Sierra. Your child will carry it too. It explained everything. The intense mate bond, the second chance connection, the silver light that had poured from her hands on the battlefield. She wasn't nobody. She had never been nobody. The Council of Alphas convened 3 days later. Their decree was unanimous. Sierra Thornwood, as a lunar wolf, was under council protection. No alpha could claim ownership of her. She was free to choose her own pack, her own mate, her own path. Free. The word tasted foreign on her tongue, like a fruit she'd heard described but never eaten. Cale came to her on a gray afternoon. He didn't sit in the chair this time. He stood in the doorway, filling it with his massive frame, silver eyes uncertain in a way she'd never seen before. He told her about his father, the beatings, his mother's death, how he'd built walls so thick he'd forgotten there was a person behind them, how he'd looked at her that first day in the great hall and felt the bond crack him open, and how the terror of that vulnerability had made him cruel. I rejected you because you made me feel something I couldn't control, he said. It's not a justification, it's a confession. He didn't ask her to come back. He asked to be allowed to prove he could change, not for the child, for her. Sierra didn't forgive him, not yet, but she nodded. Ronan came the following morning. She apologized without excuses, told him the truth she should have told from the beginning. He listened. His jaw worked. His green eyes were bright with pain he refused to shed. I understand why you lied, he said finally. I don't like it, but I understand. He reached out and tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, gentle, tender, final. If you choose me, it has to be free. I won't be another cage for you, Sierra. Her heart cracked, quietly, cleanly. She chose Cale, not because the bond compelled her, not because he was powerful or because he was the father of her child. She chose him because she had watched him dismantle himself, brick by brick, wall by wall, and try to rebuild into something worthy. His redemption was imperfect, messy, ongoing, but it was real. She accepted the mate bond fully. When it snapped into place, whole, mutual, unbroken, it felt like the moon itself was singing through her bones. The baby came on a full moon night. A daughter, gray eyes like her father, auburn hair like her mother, a faint silver glow beneath her skin that marked her lunar heritage. Cale held her for the first time and wept, openly. Silently, tears streaming down the face of the most feared alpha in Thornhaven while his daughter wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb. Ronan visited the next day. He held Luna gently, something bittersweet and peaceful settling across his scarred face. Not his child, but he'd helped bring her safely into the world. That mattered. He found a new mate eventually, a fierce northern warrior who matched him in every way. At a council gathering months later, he and Cale shared a tense, genuine toast across a crowded room. Progress, not perfection. On a clear night months after Luna's birth, Sierra stood on the balcony of the Ironclaw pack house. The fortress hadn't changed, still stone, still steel, still ancient, but it felt different now. Warmer, like the walls themselves had learned to breathe. Cale came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her hair. Do you regret choosing me? He asked quietly. Sierra turned in his arms. She traced the scar on his jaw with her thumb, this man who had been her tormentor, her mate, her greatest wound and her hardest won love. Every single day, she said, smiling. He tensed. And I'd choose you every single time. Above them, the moon blazed silver-white across the endless sky, and somewhere deep in the pine forest, A wolf howled, long, clear, triumphant. Nix answered. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel for more werewolf romance tales, alpha kings, rejected mates, and powerful omega stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Leave a comment below telling me what you thought of this story and what kind of werewolf stories you'd like to see next. Your support means everything and helps me create more content like this.